Let me begin, like others in this House, with expressing my appreciation and admiration for all our national athletes, regardless of whether they may or may not have medaled in the most recent Games. This extends, of course, to our most recent medalists in Paris, Geraldine Tan and Max Maida, as well as Yaping Siu, our country's most decorated sportsperson. Now, all of us that have played sport will understand the enormous sacrifices and challenges that athletes had to endure to climb the pinnacle of sporting achievement. Their feats would not have been possible without years of grueling dedication to their chosen sport, culminating in translating those countless hours into competition day delivery that would have had to be one of the best in their lives. This was undoubtedly the case for Geraldine, Pinsu, and Max, after which this motion specifically has named. Geraldine had trailed by 5 points at the halfway mark, but was able to muster a fierce comeback that forced a tiebreaker in the final round. It was her enormous composure and mental prowess in the face of tough odds that led us to our first Paralympic boccia medal. Kite foiler Max had to overcome a somewhat slow start in the first race of the final to pull into second place. But it was his steady consistency in the face of poor weather conditions during the finals that saw him ultimately snatch a place on the podium. In doing so, he tacked and jibed his way into history as our nation's youngest Olympic medalist, and of course into our hearts. And Pinsu displayed her usual fortitude, not allowing the complacency of being the world record holder or already having won gold twice in the 100-meter S2 backstroke to faze her, as she clocked a historic three-peat that saw her taking home a gold on the second day of the Games, followed by another 2 days later in the 50-meter backstroke. To them, and all the others here that have carried our flag, we celebrate and honor your immense physical and mental strength that have led to your wonderful accomplishments. Now, without diminishing the passion and hard work that our athletes have driven our athletes to their sporting success, I would like to share some thoughts about how we reward them. As those in this House are aware, we currently have programs that offer monetary rewards for medals. I previously filed a question to this House asking the Minister for Community, Culture and Youth what the parameters were for determining the cash incentive awards offered under the Major Games Award, or MGA, of the Singapore National Olympic Council, or SNOC, and why a distinction existed between the SNOC's MGA and the Athletes Achievement Awards, or AAA, of the Singapore National Paralympic Council, or SNPC, when measured at comparable international levels. Questions of this nature are not unique to me, of course. PAP and Workers' Party members of Parliament have previously asked questions about seemingly unequal rewards and recognition accorded to both athletes with and without disabilities. This is clearly a matter of bipartisan concern. In the parliamentary reply by then Minister for MCCY Grace Fu, she explained that the SNOC and SNPC were non-governmental organizations and that the MGA and AAA were decided by sponsors and donors. This response was essentially repeated by Minister Tong's response to previous PQs that had been filed. Now, the SNOC and SNPC are undeniably NGOs. But they are NGOs of this. Are they indeed NGOs of the same standing and milieu as, say, the Association of Women for Action and Research, or AWARE, SIONI, or the Humanitarian Organization for Migration Economics, or HOME? The SNOC was established to receive the official invitation by the IOC to send Singaporean representatives to the Games. The current president of the SNOC is Minister Grace Fu, and past presidents and council members include ministers and MPs. And who are these sponsors and donors? The SNOC states on its website that the primary sponsor of the MGA is the Tote Board family, comprising Singapore Pools and the Singapore Turf Club. The SNPC has similar language describing the primary sponsor of the AAA. The Tote Board is a government agency, and its activities and those of its subsidiary entities are regulated by various ministries. Each year, the subsidiaries contribute hundreds of millions to nation-building efforts and indirectly to the budget through taxes on betting. Hence, what's true that SNOC and SNPC are NGOs and that the sponsors of the MGA and AAA are varied, it is difficult to see why the government has decided that it cannot exercise greater influence over the amounts granted by these two sporting award programs. So, if the government does choose to exercise greater influence over the MGA and AAA, the question that remains is whether the current amounts granted in each are reasonable from an economic and moral perspective. What should the value of such an award be? Some have claimed that we ought to respect the economics of supply and demand. While I do not believe, ironically enough, that economics should be the basis for justifying such awards, allow me to elaborate on why such arguments are somewhat naive. The supply side is straightforward. This is the effort expended by our sportsmen and women that compete in major international games. But as any athlete would tell you, their driving motivation to perform at their best in the sporting arena often has very little to do with monetary gains. Indeed, most do it for their deep love for the game and would almost certainly do it for comparatively little money. And the fact that so many of our athletes do so for generally low levels of remuneration is a living testament to that reality. Many have put their lives on hold to bring glory to the nation. Still, there's no denying that even our leanest and meanest athletes need to eat, drink, and earn a living. At the margin, rewards for performance at the highest levels do make a difference in ensuring that our sportsmen and women are able to continue the pursuit of their passion, not least by allowing them to persist in the rigors of their training and climbing the ladder of competition during the lean years, where success is neither assured nor yet guaranteed. In contrast, demand derives from us, the audience and supporters and lovers of a sport. Our interests and willingness to pay for the joy and entertainment we receive when we watch sporting events is what allows a sport, any sport, to be viable enough that professionals can emerge. It is along these lines that some have chosen to argue that the comparative lack of demand for the Paralympics means that there's little economic justification to rewarding Paralympians with the same order of monetary compensation as our Olympians when they medal. Here is the problem with such an argument. While such dynamics may be true for any sport as a whole, it seldom translates into actual compensation for individual sportsmen and women. After all, raw market forces have seldom been the sole driver for monetary compensation in sport. If so, the US women's soccer team, which both draws far larger crowds and generates significantly larger revenue, at least within the US, and has, in fact, achieved much greater sporting success than the men's team, would not have filed suit against its own soccer federation for reasons of unequal pay. Nor would the athletes playing in the billion-dollar NCAA leagues continue to receive only limited compensation in the form of tuition waivers, living expenses, and endorsement rights. But let us take such an argument to its logical conclusion. If we were to reward our athletes according to eyeballs, then surely our awards must vary by sport, differing rewards for soccer versus sepak takraw versus silat in accordance to their popularity. But we do not, and rightly so. We recognize that we wish to support a wide range of sport because we see the value in each and every one of them. Rather, salaries and rewards in sport are determined as much by sponsorship interests, relative bargaining power, and the institutional strictures, much like the payouts for the MGA and the AAA are. So I have sketched out the case for why economics does not offer an unequivocal case for unequal treatment between the MGA and AAA. But it's worth perhaps exploring the moral arguments, which I believe are even more compelling. Hence, another argument sometimes made to justify the differential rewards that our Paralympians compete in finer categories. Subsequently, their field of competition is correspondingly smaller and hence they deserve less of a reward for rising to the top of that narrowed field. To me, this is again a distinction without a difference. Fields widen and narrow every year for all sorts of reasons. Birth cohorts fall in size in certain Chinese horoscope years and rise in others, but we don't tell those who were born in the year of the dragon that their A division goals somehow deserve more acclaim than those who were born in other years. Similarly, we don't tell our female weightlifters and bodybuilders that, because their sport is less popular among women than it is with men, or that more bodyweight categories exist in one gender versus the other, they should receive a smaller award when they win. Rather, our awards are simply organized by coverage of the competition. If the rules for participation allow for global, continental, or regional, we scope out award sizes accordingly, regardless of how many competitors eventually sign up. This approach is defensible because while it does not prescribe in advance whether any given sport or athlete should be deemed more worthy of a greater reward based on their observable attributes. Instead, it focuses, as it should, on how many potential competitors there might be based on the geographic scope of the competition. This argument also glosses over the fact that what the different categories capture are disabilities. Lest we forget, Paralympians placed in these different categories are competing not on the basis of these classifications, but in spite of them. Hence, I personally find any suggestion that the athlete is somehow, even if indirectly, benefiting from this smaller field, morally indefensible. So this speech has been about equal compensation, but life, of course, is about much more than that. I will conclude by explaining why equality in monetary rewards for sport implies something that goes well beyond the pecuniary. Certainly, our country recognizes and celebrates the achievements of our Paralympians in many ways beyond the financial. But in my view, not only are such accolades insufficient, they also strike me as inconsistent. If these non-pecuniary benefits alone were sufficient, then surely no additional MGA or AAA would be necessary. Conversely, if we see the value to a monetary reward of even a single dollar, then it behooves us to explain why we are comfortable with a distinction between our able-bodied versus disabled sports people. To put it in more concrete terms, we should be able to explain why Ms. Yip Pin Siu, our country's most successful sportsperson, has been rewarded comparatively less than others for achievements of a comparable caliber. I believe we should take the economically and ethically justifiable step of equalizing the monetary awards offered to our Olympians and Paralympians in their respective award programs. I believe that this government, as a key stakeholder in the IOC, as the controlling body of the tote board, and as the elected leaders of our people and society, can make the call to do so. We should not defer the decision to other bodies with less standing. Other countries have also taken steps to move toward parity between the two. Canada announced at the start of this year that medals for Paralympians would be equal to those of their Olympian counterparts. The United States has done so since 2018 and even renamed their national governing body into the Olympic and Paralympic Committee. Host nation France increased funding by 2.5 times so that they would be able to reward their medalists equally. We routinely argue in this House about ensuring equal opportunities for every Singaporean. We have repeatedly spoken about fostering a society of compassion and empathy. And we await the passage in this House on a non-discrimination bill, an idea that the Workers' Party has championed for a long time. Minister Tong has spoken of plans to revise and refresh the DSMP. Let us do so with the MGA and the AAA too, recognizing the accomplishments of all our sportsmen and sportswomen equally, with the rewards that they so definitively deserve.